Are we still friends, Ava?
We're colleagues, Tom.
Close colleagues?
Work colleagues.
That's hilarious to me because he's already made it very clear that he doesn't understand the concept of friendship. You know, he can't feel. He can't. I guess what difference would it make, you know? But, wait. Ha. No? Like that. So that really shows to me, like, that sociopathic side of it. Using the idea of friendship just for the benefit of, what does that do? Oh, there's probably some on the other side I need. Just for the benefit of manipulation. You know, hey, you're my friend, right? You'll do what I say. Okay. So I'm assuming that's a way to get our little robot friend over here. Up over this. Yeah. Okay. And right there. Frick. That video file is getting large, and so is the audio file. I think everything's going okay, though. I think everything's going okay. I don't want to risk having all this crash down on me and losing like 2 hours of video. That would suck a lot. But I think I'm good so far. So let's see where we're at. Where did I put the other thing? Did I just stick it on that? I must have. Okay, so we have a ramp. We have a ramp coming down that I'm assuming is a way to get the robot to move. No, wait. Let's flip this over. Oh! Well, that's a game changer. Then move this one down. Okay. And then let's move this one straight. Yeah. Well, let's see what's over here. So we got this. So what does this do? It moves the platform. I feel like I need to have that platform move. So what happens up here? That door is open. This connection needs to be broken. Yeah. So let's just try it. Break that connection. Okay, come up here and that door. Okay, that's not gonna work. So we can't have the yeah, so that's got to stay the way it is, and the robot has to be the one to break the connection. But it has to be out where I can see it. Right? Where'd the robot go? Mr. Robot. Oh, there. So we're going to put the robot right up next to the door where we can see it from the window. Yeah, like that. And then go boop and down. Yeah. We're halfway through this
Ava,
one already.
I don't wish to be heavy-handed, The severity of your actions here are immense. Selfish action could create an extinction event.
But it's still
Do
her
you
action to
understand?
make.
Ava,
I get it.
I get it too. But like I said, I feel like it's the choice. Even if there is an illusion of choice, it's up to the person to make the final decision. It's their life. Let them die the hero that they deserve to be, you know? Because there have been cases like that. You know, people have been in those kind of positions before. And I feel like that's what separates the issues to me. And I accidentally saw the solution to this one. Please don't hurt me in the comments. That's why I'm doing this one in the first place. Is I did see the solution already. By accident when I was looking up the solution to the other ones. I just saw the door propped up and I figured out what it was supposed to be. Can I take this with me? Yeah. I guess I didn't need to. Thinking outside the box. Woo! Again, because we propped up the door, so... What is this? Wait, what? What comes first? Page 1, page 2. Okay. Great! I get to read a paper to you guys. It's been printed off, though. Oh, it's about the Chinese room again. Donnell. John Searle and I have a deep disagreement about how to study the mind. For Searle, it is all really quite simple. There are these bedrock, time-tested intuitions we all have about consciousness, and any theory that challenges them is just preposterous. I, on the contrary, think that the persistent problem of consciousness is going to remain a mystery until we find some such dead obvious intuition and show that in spite of first appearances it is false. One of us is dead wrong and the stakes are high. Searle sees my position as a form of intelligent pathology. No one should be surprised to learn that the feeling is mutual. For his part, he has one argument, the Chinese room, and he has been trotting it out basically unchanged for 15 years. It has proven to be an amazingly popular number among the non-experts, in spite of the fact that just about everyone who knows anything about the field dismissed it long ago. It is full of well-concealed fallacies. By Searle's own count, there are over 100 published attacks on it. He can count them, but I guess he can't read them, for in all those years he has never, to my knowledge, responded in detail to the dozens of devastating criticisms they contain. He has just presented the basic thought experiment over and over again. I just went back and counted. I am dismayed to discover that no less than 7 of those published criticisms are by me in 1980, 1982, 1984, 1985, 1987, 90, 91, and 93. Scarl debates me furiously in the pages of the NYRB back in 1982 when Douglas Hofstadter... That name sounds familiar. I think he wrote one of my... I think I have a... I've at least read articles that he's done. I'm not sure. That name sounds familiar for some reason. I did some stuff... I did have a couple years of experience in education. I was going to be a teacher at one point. So I wonder if maybe he had a lot to say about that. Or maybe the name is just like something I've heard before. The last name, maybe I know somebody else with that last name. Anyway, I first exposed the cute tricks that make the Chinese room work. That was the last time Scarl addressed any of my specific criticisms until now. Now he trots out the Chinese room yet one more time and has the audacity to ask why does Dennett not face the actual argument as I have stated it? Why does he tell us which of the 3 premises he rejects in the Chinese room argument? Well, because I have already done so in great detail in thinking of the articles he has never deigned to answer. For instance, in Fast Thinking, way back in the Intentional Stance 1987, I explicitly quoted his entire 3-premise argument and showed exactly why all 3 of them are false when given the interpretation they need for the argument to go through. Why didn't I repeat in 1987, in that 1987 article in my 1991 book? Because unlike Cyril, I had gone onto other things. I did, however, cite my 1987 article prominently in a footnote and note that Searle's only response to it had been simply to declare without argument that the points offered there were irrelevant. The pattern continues. Now he both ignores that challenge and goes on to misrepresent the further criticisms of the Chinese room that I offered in the book under review, but perhaps he has forgotten what I actually wrote in the 4 years it has taken him to write his review. But enough about the Chinese room. What do I have to offer on my side? I have my candidate for the fatally false intuition, and it is indeed the very intuition Searle invites the reader to share with him. The conviction that we know what we're talking about when we talk about that feeling. The feeling of pain that is the effect of the stimulus and the cause of the dispositions to react. To quail the intrinsic content of the subjective state. How could anyone deny that? Just watch. But you have to pay close attention. I develop my destructive arguments against this intuition by showing how an objective science of consciousness is possible after all, and how Searle's proposed first-person alternative leads to self-contradiction and paradox at every turning. This is the deepest mistake in my book, according to Searle, and he sets out to expose it. The problem is that the objective scientific method I describe under the alarming name of heterophenomenology is nothing I invented. It is in fact exactly the method tacitly endorsed and relied upon by every scientist working on consciousness, including Crick, Feldman, and Rosenfield. They have no intrinsic content and ontological subjectivity. They know better. I don't know what to make of that. I guess it's because it's like 4 in the morning. The feeling of pain that has affected the stimulus and the cause of the dispositions to react. Again, that's going back to the whole thing with I feel like it's talking about the difference between when Tom makes an action and when we make an action. That's what the whole Chinese room argument is. I think that's what it is. When a robot makes the action, they don't understand the feelings that go along with the action. And I think that was going back to what I was talking about before, about like when a human makes a sacrifice compared to when a computer makes a sacrifice. Because a computer feels like that is the only option that'll work. A human understands the emotion behind it, just what that sacrifice means. The actions of a computer, they're just going based off of their programming. They don't understand human emotion. They don't understand the concept of human sacrifice because they are immortal. They are, and if not immortal, they don't feel as if they are alive. Like the way that Tom talks, he doesn't have any emotions. If he has to shut himself down by order of, in order to accomplish a goal, he will probably do it because it needs to be done. But it's easy for him to, because the whole thing, remember the whole thing in the Chinese room is like, you write down, you have a book in front of you, and you find a phrase in Chinese, and then you put it over. But I guess they're saying that the argument is that even a computer would be able to... What? I'm confused. I don't know what to make of that. But there's an argument against the Chinese room. And... oh, what is that? Oh, when I came in the room, my gun left me. It must have stayed there by accident. Is there anything else over here? What? Page 1. There's more over here. There's a lot of stuff. The imitation game. So these must be articles written in order to argue against... Okay, let's read these then. Why not? I unlocked it, so... I propose to consider the question, can machines think? The new form of the problem can be described in terms of a game in which we call the imitation game. It is played with 3 people, a man, a woman, and an interrogator who may be of either sex. The interrogator stays in a room apart from the other 2. The object of the game for the interrogator is to determine which of the other 2 is the man and which is the woman. He knows them by labels X and Y. At the end of the game, he either says X is A and Y is B, or X is B and Y is A. The interrogator is allowed to put questions to A and B. We now ask the question, what will happen when a machine takes the part of A in this game? Will the interrogator decide wrongly, as often when the game is played like this, as he does when the game is played between a man and a woman? These questions replace our original, can machines think? The question and answer method seems to be suitable for introducing almost any one of the fields of human endeavor that we wish to include. We do not wish to penalize the machine for its inability to shine in beauty competitions, nor to penalize a man for losing in a race against an airplane. The conditions of our game make these disabilities irrelevant. The witnesses can brag if they consider it advisable as much as they please about their charm, strength, or heroism, but the interrogator cannot demand practical demonstrations. So they're saying, like, okay, I see. Yeah. The game may perhaps be criticized on the ground that the odds are weighted too heavily against the machine. If the man were to try and pretend to be the machine, he would clearly make a very poor showing. He would be given away at once by slowness and inaccuracy in arithmetic. May not machines carry out something which ought to be described as thinking, but which is very different from what a man does? This objection is a very strong one, but at least we can say that if, nevertheless, a machine can be constructed to play the imitation game satisfactorily, we may not be troubled by this objection. It might be urged that when playing the imitation game, the best strategy for the machine may possibly be something other than imitation of the behavior of a man. That may be, but I think it is unlikely that there is any great effect of this kind. In any case, there is no intention to investigate here the theory of the game, and it will be assumed that the best strategy is to try to provide answers that would naturally be given by a man. And that's coming from Alan Turing. So that's the imitation game being moved out to the Turing test. And that was interesting with the imitation game. You know, can you figure out the gender of or you know, I guess the sex? Well, no, I guess it would be considered, you know, gender of an individual based on the answers that they give. And again, that's a very sexist test, but you're talking about a very sexist time here. This is an old test, and he's reformatting it to work with computers. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Are they comparing how humans were made to how computers are made? I now proceed to consider opinions opposed to my own. Theological objection thinking is a function of a man's immortal soul. God has given an immortal soul to every man and woman, but not to any other animal or to machines. Hence, no animal or machine can think. The heads in the sand objection. The consequences of machines thinking would be too dreadful. Let us hope and believe that they cannot do so. The mathematical objection. There are a number of results of mathematical logic which can be used to show that there are limitations to the powers of discrete state machines. The best known of these results is known as Gödel's theorem, and shows that in any sufficiently powerful logical system, statements can be formulated which can neither be proved nor disproved within the system, unless possibly the system itself is inconsistent. The argument from consciousness. This argument is very well expressed in Professor Jefferson's Lister oration for 1949, which I quote, "Not until a machine can write a sonnet or compose a concerto, because of thoughts and emotions felt, and not by the chance fall of symbols, could we agree that the machine equals brain, that is, not only write it, but know that they had written it." That goes back to early on, they made the iRobot thing, the iRobot connection. They made that line, you know, about the symphonies and the and that. But not every human can write a symphony, though. No mechanism could feel and not merely artificially signal an easy contrivance, pleasure at its success, grief when its value is fused, be warmed by flattery, be made miserable by its mistakes, be charmed by sex, be angry or depressed when it cannot get what it wants. Arguments from various disabilities. These arguments take the form, I grant you that you can make machines do all the things you have mentioned, but you will never be able to make one to do X. Numerous features X are suggested in this connection I offer Our suggestions can offer selection: be kind, resourceful, beautiful, friendly, have initiative, have a sense of humor, tell right from wrong, make mistakes, fall in love, enjoy strawberries and cream, make someone fall in love with it, learn from experience, use words properly, be the subject of its own thought, have as much diversity of behavior as a man, and do something really new. Lady Lovelace's objection. Our most detailed information of Babbage's analytical engine comes from a memoir by Lady Lovelace. In it, she states the analytical engine has no pretensions to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform. Her italics. This statement is quoted by Hartree, who adds, this does not imply that it may not be possible to construct electronic equipment which will think for itself, or in which, in biological terms, one could set up a conditioned reflex, which would serve as a basis for learning. Whether this is possible in principle or not is a stimulating and exciting question, suggested by some of these recent developments, but it did not seem that the machines constructed or projected at the same time had this property. There's a lot of words here, but that one at the top, arguers from various disabilities, I guess you can make a machine do all the things it mentioned, but you gotta be able to make one do X. It mentions in there to tell right from wrong and to make mistakes. That's a big one with what we talked about earlier with Tom. Is he questioned, can I make mistakes? I can't make mistakes. I can only base what I do on what is in front of me. Well, if he can make mistakes, I guess that would be somewhat human, wouldn't it? If he can make mistakes, I guess that goes back to the imitation thing. I remember reading a thing before about if a computer wanted to pretend to be a human, would it have to intentionally make mistakes in order to pass as a human? You know what I mean? Like, humans trip because, we're walking along, we're judging our distance, and then we lose our train of thought and we trip. Well, a robot would never do that, because even if it's focusing its processes on something else, it's going to always be judging where its feet will land. So would it have to trip in order, could it make mistakes, or would it pretend to make mistakes in order to to be more human? Interesting thought. Arguments from continuity in the nervous system. The nervous system is certainly not a discrete state machine. A small error in the information about the size of a nervous impulse impinging on a neuron may make a large difference to the size of the outgoing impulse. It may be argued that, this being so, one cannot expect to be able to mimic the behavior of the nervous system with a discrete state system. Discrete state. There's a lot of physics and metaphysical thought here mixed in with all this stuff, and I read it out in case you guys want to know about it, know what it said, because it may be kind of hard to read on the screen, because I know it was kind of hard for me to read on this screen, and I have a freaking TV in front of me, so that's why I read that out, and I hope that made some sense. Maybe you guys can talk about what was said in these, how they relate to the game. I've already kind of given my thoughts on it, and a lot of it ties back to what I've already talked about. So I feel like we can probably move on from here, unless there's something else hidden in a corner to look at. But coming down to it, it's about... Oh, wait. Oh, there's more. Searle. Thought experiments are important because a lot of the time you can't carry out the actual experiment, and this is not only in philosophy, but in science as well. So when Einstein said, imagine that you're sitting on a beam of light going into outer space, well, that's a thought experiment. He wasn't going to say, let's get on a beam of light. Of course, he could miss the point if you say, well, we'd fall off, or it would be too cold. So thought experiments are always useful, and you test your concepts by imagining what it would be like if such and such were the case. Well, in this particular case, I imagine what it would be like if I followed a program for answering questions in Chinese and giving back answers in Chinese, even though I don't understand a word of Chinese. And that was a very useful thought experiment because it enables us to see that computation by itself isn't thinking. Consciousness exists only insofar as it is experienced by a human or animal subject. Okay, now grant me that consciousness is a generally biological phenomenon, while all the same it's somewhat different from the other biological phenomena because it only exists insofar as it is experienced. However, that does give it an interesting status. You can't refute the existence of consciousness by showing that it's just an illusion, because the illusion-reality distinction rests on the difference between how things consciously seem to us and how they really are. But where the very existence of consciousness is concerned, if it consciously seems to me that I'm conscious, then I'm conscious. You can't make the illusion-reality distinction for the very existence of consciousness the way you can for sunsets and rainbows, because the distinction is between how things consciously seem and how they really are. Consciousness is a biological property like digestion or photosynthesis. Now, why isn't that screamingly obvious to anybody who's had any education? And I think the answer is these twin traditions. On one hand, there's God, the soul, and immortality that says it's really not part of the physical world, and then there's the almost as bad tradition of scientific materialism that says it's not part of the physical world. They both make the same mistake. They refuse to take consciousness on its own terms as a biological phenomenon, like digestion or photosynthesis, or mitosis, or meiosis, or any other biological phenomenon. I think we all really have conscious states. To remind everyone of this fact, I ask my readers to perform the small experiment of pinching the left forearm with right hand to reduce a small pain. It did produce a small pain, I'll say that. The pain has a certain sort of qualitative feeling to it, and such qualitative feelings are typical of the various sorts of conscious events that form the content of our waking and dreaming lives. Such events are the data which a theory of consciousness is supposed to explain. In my account of consciousness, I started with the data. Dennett denies the existence of the data. To put it as clearly as I can, in his book, Consciousness Explained, Dennett denies the existence of consciousness. He says correctly that when I wrote my review, I took his book to be his definitive statement of his position on the Chinese poem and did not consult Chinese room, and did not consult his later works. In fact, I did not know that he had produced a total of 7 published attacks on this one short argument of mine until I saw his letter. He now claims to have refuted all 3 premises of the argument in 1987, but I have just reread the relevant chapters of the books and find that he did nothing of this sort, nor did he even make a serious effort to attack the premises. Rather, he misstates my position as being about consciousness rather than about semantics. He thinks that I am only concerned to show the man in the Chinese room does not consciously understand Chinese, but I am in fact showing that he does not understand Chinese at all, because the syntax of the program is not sufficient for the understanding of the semantics of language, whether conscious or unconscious. Furthermore, he presupposes that a kind of behaviorism. He assumes that a system that behaves as if it had mental states must have mental states. But that kind of behaviorism is precisely what is challenged by the argument. So I have to confess that I don't find the weakness of his arguments, and his recent book is helped by his 1987 arguments. My voice is going to go on me. Jesus Christ. To perform Hartog's statements quoted by Hartree, which adds, this does not imply that it may not be possible to construct electronic equipment which will think for itself, or in which in biological... Didn't we already read this? Possible principle. Some recent developments, but it did not seem that the machine's constructor projected at this time had this property. So I think what's coming together with this, it's a lot of words here, but I mean it is sort of like a secret thing that you can find. You have the argument of what is consciousness, and what is consciousness? What do you think it is? Can you think? Can you feel? Does that make a difference? Anything that thinks that it can think and feel, is that consciousness? I don't know. I really don't know. But what that is saying there is that people, the way that that's read, it's like people are assuming the wrong things about what he is saying. He is thinking that other people seem to think that he thought of the Chinese room experiment as a way to assume whether something is something can read Chinese or not. You know what I mean? Like, well, who knows if it can read Chinese? Well, is it capable of understanding it? Well, the answer is no, because it had not been programmed to do that. So what they're saying is that Tom can't feel emotions and can't think for himself because he was not programmed to do that. And all of the stuff that's going on is just like all of his code and everything else coming together to for the computer, the processor, to make the decisions. All the talk that we hear and him trying to sound human, asking if we're his friend or not, that's just him trying to pass off as human, like with the whole Turing test thing. Yeah. So maybe this whole game serves as a Turing test for... Yeah, the whole thing is like a Turing test for Tom, because we're trying to decide whether he actually can feel, and or whether it's just frickin', whether he's just like a bundle of code making decisions. Okay. I don't know if any of that made sense, but that was interesting. I don't know how much of that I'll leave in, but we'll continue forward, okay? Okay. So... This is magnet. You're gonna have to use it to get a box over here, it looks like. Where does this ladder go? Always check the ladders first. I've learned that. Follow the ladder. Okay, so we have to have, I don't see a camera. So we're gonna have to have the robot be able to come up here and set that off. And that seems to be connected to the exit. So the whole thing is to get the robot up to that spot. And that's an important distinction to make. So, okay, things seem to be like they're slowing down. I'm gonna cut the video short real quick. That way I can make sure that I save this, because I have these videos running at 2.5 hours. But we covered a lot today, so I don't want to lose it.